Good evening.
Good evening.
Your pastor invited me to be here with you this evening to share a little bit of perspective with you. I'm not sure if you have figured out my identity yet. Perhaps I can give you a bit of a clue. If you can't figure it out, it's just humbug. Humbug, I say! Actually, I was a bit of a humbug many years ago. I am Ebenezer Scrooge. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with my story. Lord knows it's been made into enough Hollywood movies by now. Personally, I prefer Alistair Sim. I think he portrayed me best of all. And I think George C. Scott should stick to portraying Army generals and leave me alone. But if you're familiar with the story, you know that I had a troubled childhood. My daddy didn't love me. Actually, he blamed me for the death of his wife. And I grew up feeling unloved and insecure. I had relatives who tried to care for me, but I rejected them because I felt myself to be unworthy of their love. I even had a sweetheart, but I had something that I loved even more than she, and that was the love of money. Because I felt that if I accumulated enough money, I could have security. And so together with my partner, Jacob, we set about in business to accumulate as much money as we could. You know the story, how one night after supper I'm sitting alone in my room and Jacob comes to visit me, dragging behind him a chain forged by all the evil and unkind things he had done in his life. And I explained to him, Jacob, we have nothing to fear, no reason to be sorry after all. It was just business. And he replies, mankind should have been my business. And then he warns me that the chain I've forged is longer than his. And he alerts me that night that I'm going to be visited by 3 spirits. And sure enough, with special effects worthy of Spielberg, 3 spirits come to visit me. The ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, and the ghost of Christmas yet to come. And they shared their message with me, alerting me to the fact that as I grew up, I had cut myself off from the world. And as a result, I was living a life of miserable isolation. But rather, the people who loved me yearned for me to love them. And at the same time, that 3rd spirit helped me to see that unless I repented and changed my ways, my future was going to be a dark and gloomy one. And you know how it goes from there. I yell down to the street to this urchin running by. I throw him money and tell him to go buy the largest goose that he can find hanging in the butcher shop and deliver it to the home of my clerk, Bob Cratchit. And I went and spent time with my nephew and enjoyed Christmas dinner with them. And the Cratchits are all happy that their life is better, and the little squirt, God bless us, everyone. Oh, gag me. Because you see, the thing is, I understood most of the messages, but I had not understood them in their entirety. For there was one more spirit yet to appear to me. You see, I believed that by turning my life around, the more good things I could do for other people, the happier God would be with me. And so I set about to earn my way into heaven, taking away from all the things I had done for myself, and instead focusing on what I could do for others. And then one Sunday, my nephew persuaded me to go to church with him. It was some Lutheran church where they sang Barry Manilow and Karen Carpenter on Sunday mornings. And the pastor spoke from St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians. And the words he read struck me in my heart. He said, I could have the ability to speak the languages of people and even of angels. But if I don't have love, it's just hollow noise. I could understand all mysteries, but without love, it profits me nothing. I could give away everything I have and even offer myself as a sacrifice. But if my motivation for doing so is not love, it gains nothing. Because love is what God did for us, unworthy as we were. And so that Christmas, as I sat in church with them and sang Silent Night and held my little candle, I realized that I had already received the greatest gift I could ever have gotten. And that was the gift of God's love, his forgiveness, his salvation, and his promise of heaven. And that's when I realized that all the good deeds in the world that I might do profited me nothing unless they came out of a proper motivation. For you see, that fourth Spirit that spoke to me was God's Holy Spirit, who reminded me that I was precious in God's eyes. So much so that God had offered himself as the payment for my transgressions. I no longer need to worry about whether or not I had done enough good things, but rather relied solely upon God's grace, which was shared with me freely through his Son as a gift. And it's something I didn't have to earn, but rather could simply receive by accepting it in faith that what God had done, he did for me. And so, Christians, we gather tonight to sing the familiar hymns and carols, to hear Pastor read the familiar lessons, to say the prayers we've been saying all our lives, and to celebrate Christmas as we have every year till now. But it doesn't matter how many lights you have on your house, or how magnificent is your tree, or how many gifts you give to relatives who will be exchanging them tomorrow. It's your motivation for doing so. The gratitude of knowing that you are loved by God and saved through the sacrifice of his Son. Throughout this Christmas season, you will have the opportunity to learn more about Jesus and this gift that God gave you. But for tonight, realize it isn't humbug. It's salvation. Merry Christmas, people of grace.